Okay.
For our final installment on communication, I am so excited to have Tony Overbay as my guest. Tony is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified mindful habit coach, and a popular motivational speaker. He also has an amazing podcast called The Virtual Couch, where he addresses a variety of topics facing families today, including overcoming pornography addiction and compulsive sexual behavior, couples issues, and parenting. In addition to being a therapist, Tony is married with 4 teenage and adult children, a motivational speaker, and ultra marathon runner. So I'd like to welcome Tony to the podcast today. Welcome, Tony. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Amanda. I sometimes I feel like it makes me sound old though with the 4 teenage and adult children, but it's true. I mean, I can't deny that.
Well, especially in the Latter-day Saint culture, we tend to start having kids young. Most people tell me like I don't look old enough to have a 19-year-old, but I am.
Right. And when we did the thing where we waited 7 years, so I mean, we waited a long time.
Yeah.
But I do think that I think that my haircut actually makes me look a lot younger. I think the bald stuff kind of hides it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely don't look old enough to have adult children.
That was me fishing for that. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Amanda.
All right. So the last few weeks, I've been focusing on communication in marriage here in the podcast. And I've talked about empathetic listening, having weekly marriage check-ins with your spouse. And last week, we talked about learning how to fight fair. And I found that communication in marriage is such an important skill to have, and one where couples really seem to be missing some key elements. So which usually contributes to a lot of the struggles that they're having in their marriage.
Exactly. Yeah.
What kind of issues due to poor communication have you seen in your practice?
Is it okay if I just say all of them?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, I really feel like at the core, when I get a couple in, it's really wanting to be heard, so it's like they come into couples therapy often, and it's that old concept of, just tell us which one is right. It's like I'm the referee and I'm supposed to, I will hear your complaints now and then I will rule. And that's that's not productive, right? Because I feel like that's the mentality I think that a lot of people are going into communication with is I just have to convince my partner. If they just understood what I'm saying, then they would understand that I'm right. They would back off and we would live happily ever after. But little do they know the person on the other side of the couch is doing the same thing. If they would just hear me, then, and so I feel like that's what I see coming into counseling. So it can be about anything. I deal a lot in the world of addiction recovery. And so a lot of that is, when people don't feel connected to their partner, then they do feel sometimes like isolated or what's wrong with me, or they feel broken. And so they turn away from their partner, and that's, and then they'll turn to everything from, I do a lot with pornography addiction, but there's a lot of where people turn to social media, they turn to gaming, they turn to food, to Netflix, whatever that is. So,
in life coaching.
So, I mean, I guess the long-winded answer, which I'm very good at doing, right?
Yeah, we call that
there you go.
Life coaching. So they turn to that instead of actually dealing with those hard emotions and dealing with each other. Yeah. So you have a modality in couples counseling called emotionally focused therapy. And I really like to talk about that today because I think that is key in helping couples communicate better. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, and I apologize if I've told this to some people that might be listening, maybe have heard this story before, but when I got into when I got into counseling, if I had one couple a week, I just thought, man, that's heavy because I didn't really with them. It was like, tell me more about that. Or this, kind of the concept of reflective listening. And then you just want them to figure it out. And so I really felt like the more that I was working with men and the more I was seeing that men, when they didn't feel connected in their relationships, were then turning to addiction. Then I thought, man, I got to get some solid to do couples counseling. So I really researched it, and I found what I felt like was the most evidence-based modality, and it's a whole it's a communication framework. It's a whole different paradigm, way to communicate, and it's this emotionally focused therapy, EFT. Mm-hmm. And it was it's fairly new in the therapy world, and the fact that it was started in the 80s.
Okay.
But it was developed, kind of from this scientific approach on adult attachment and bonding. So
Hmm.
there's there's a really cool kind of underlying science to it. And there's a woman named Dr. Sue Johnson. I think she's a Canadian psychologist who is one of the pioneers. And so there have just been now books and classes and studies. And I mean, there's so much data now that shows the success of EFT. And I even pulled up a little bit of this. It says a substantial body of research outlining the effectiveness of EFT shows that about 70 to 75% of couples move from distress to recovery.
Oh, wow.
And
That's great.
approximately 90% shows significant improvements. It is. So, I mean, it's an evidence-based modality. And so
Yeah.
what it's really based on is this concept of attachment theory. And so the attachment theory is that it's this concept that people really are made more they're made healthier by emotional contact, but they need to feel safe in those connections to others. And so when we're young and we're kind of trying to find those safe connections, it just often doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen as we would like it to. So if we're out on the playground and we don't play a sport well, or we say the wrong thing, or, and if we get teased or made fun of, that's in essence of we're being vulnerable. We're trying to join someone, form an attachment bond. And then when it doesn't go well, when we feel like we've been fixed or judged or made fun of, then we're going to start retreating. And now we're playing this game of, I don't know who I want to really open up to or be vulnerable with.
Right.
So now we're kind of playing that game. And so now when we finally get married, this is supposed to be our person. This is the one that we're supposed to be connected to. We have all this kind of baggage we bring into the relationship where, we're worried that if we're too vulnerable, that then that person's going to say, oh no, like I did not sign up for this. And that's where, the distress in relationships is it's really deeply rooted in fears of abandonment. That's that. If I'm too vulnerable and then that doesn't go well, then this person's going to leave me, abandon me.
Okay.
And so, yeah, right. So EFT is really where emotionally focused therapy is, where you're teaching a couple how to put out what are called emotional bids, where they can say, look, here's, and I do this cheesy thing we can see on the video, right? Where I'm holding my hands, like, here's my heart. What are you going to do with it? And so if I'm going to be vulnerable and I say, this is how I really feel. And if your partner says, if they're even like, you can open up to me about anything, but then you tell them something and then they say, seriously, like with how long that you've known me and you think that about me, or, then what's the response going to be? I'm going to pull the part right back and I'm going to think twice before I really try to open up again. So EFT is a whole different framework of how to communicate. And it really does need, a little bit of a guide at first, because there are pretty good rules to play when you're playing the game of EFT, because you're going to say, all right, guys, let's be vulnerable. But man, the partner needs to respond in an empathetic way, or else we're going to shut things down and it's not going to work.
Okay. So what does like an emotional bid look like in like an everyday situation?
Yeah. So I kind of come up with some cheesy things that work for me personally, and then I bring them into therapy. So this isn't one you'll see in an EFT book, but I love the concept of just coming to a partner and saying, hey, let me take you on my train of thought. That's a big one for me, because sometimes it's like, man, I've been thinking about something and this led to this thought or this thought. And now all of a sudden I feel insecure, or I feel, and so I'll say, hey, let me take you on my train of thought,
Yeah.
I feel like, and then it's kind of whatever the example is in that moment, even if it's let's just, I don't know if we want examples yet, but an emotional bid really like, okay, so I was thinking about this, and every time I feel like I need to come up with examples, sometimes I'll think, oh my gosh, I can't think of a good solid one. And I had one this morning that I thought about where, so put it this way. So a wife will come up to a husband and say, I feel like you never plan anything. I feel like you don't really care about whether we go on dates or not. I feel like, it's all on me. And normally in old school communication, then the husband's going to say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, I just planned this thing. We had friends over, and then she's like, okay, fine. You did one thing, and then all of a sudden now I would say they're back in their bunkers and they're firing shots at each other. And they basically are just going tit for tat, right? And that's where we're back to how we started, where it's like, no, I'll prove to you that you don't do much at all. And he's like, I'm locked in now. I'm going to prove that, you don't recognize anything I do. As a matter of fact, you do a bunch of crummy stuff too, and then all of a sudden we're off on a completely different topic.
Yeah.
So an emotional bid would be if let's just say that then she approaches it from an EFT standpoint, and she's like, okay, hey, let me kind of tell you where I'm at. So I kind of feel like we don't really do a lot together. When we do, I feel like I'm the one that is doing the planning. Now, if we're doing EFT, if a couple is locked into this modality, all of a sudden he knows he's going to turn right to her because now, this is my person. And she's basically putting out this emotional bid. She's saying, all right, can I count on you? Are you there for me? Do you love me? Do you have my back?
Yeah.
Are you going to listen to me? So his job is to say, I'm all in. And now it's empathy. So it's not, sympathy like, oh, that must stink, but I got stuff to do. It's empathy of like, hey, tell me where that's coming from. Tell me what led up to you putting out this emotional bid. And that's where, and it could be a lot of things, right? At that point, she could say, I was talking to my friends today and they always go on dates with their husbands. And their husband plans all of these big things and whatever, right? Or it could just be, I don't know, I just feel like you don't really care about me. And I think if we went on dates, it would matter. Or so then if he's viewing that with empathy, then now he's saying, okay, I can understand. And in the EFT world, there's no, I don't believe that. Like you can't do that when you're doing this new EFT framework. You have to say, okay, if that's where she's coming from, then I totally understand how she feels like she's the one that is doing everything. So right there, and the cool part about the EFT stuff is if she happened to have a functional brain scan machine on, which I know we all do, right?
Right.
You
would
would see that the
sitting around.
brain, absolutely, right? So then the synapses of her brain are opening up. She's like, oh my gosh, he's hearing me. He's not telling me I'm in the fault, I'm in the wrong, or that sort of thing. So then she's like, man, that, so she got her emotional bit out. He has heard her. He cares about her. And then so with that empathy, he's saying, I can understand why that would feel like I don't care about you, or like I'm the one that doesn't do the planning. Yeah. So then now it's to him, it's his turn to EFT. So that now it's like she's now going to do the same. So if he now will say, I can understand that, and that makes sense. And now he gets to share his truth, which might be, I feel like when, that I feel like I do at times, I just invited my friends over and I thought that you enjoyed that, but I can understand again, if you feel like I understand where you're coming from, but I feel like, number one, this isn't easy for me. I feel like, and then cause he can go back and say, I feel like my rejection issues from high school come up, or I feel like I'm at work all day and I will think about this, but then I guess I just don't write it down and then I don't follow through. And I guess I'm, and I didn't know it was a big of a problem, or it's, I feel like you're the more social one. I didn't know that you were thinking that I should be doing this more. So, and now we got awareness. And now if she's doing the same thing, here's him and goes, oh my gosh. Right. And then it's okay. I can understand where if that's all the stuff going through his head makes sense,
Yeah. Yeah. So what if you have like one spouse who is willing to do that and the other spouse, if they're not in couples therapy where they're both learning this new framework, you've got, most of my listeners are women. So they are like, okay, I'm going to try this, and they get nothing.
Yeah. No, you're right. So again, here comes made up thing number 2. So, and I'm trying to work on some notes of a podcast. I call it one man EFT. And I think on one of my podcasts, I talked about, it's how you get to the question. So if it's like going to, and I know, and sometimes I even feel bad saying, all right, so the wife is going to have to do all of the work, where she might be the one that's feeling like she's not heard that. And I want to recognize, I wish they didn't have to. I mean, it's not fair.
Right. No, really but
exactly,
it happens, right?
Yeah. So then that would look like, hey, tell me what you think about, with dating. Do you feel like we go on enough dates? Do you feel like, do you wish we went on more dates? It's like, so you're leading with that empathy, right? So then if he's like, oh, actually, I've never really thought about that. Or, I was thinking about that too. And I feel like we don't, or I feel like we do. Then it's like, because truthfully what she just did was, she just got him feeling safe talking about something.
Talking about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then she gets to then say, oh, okay. Because now she has that awareness. It's as if, right?
Yes.
So now she's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because man, I didn't even know you thought about that, or because here's where my brain goes is I feel like you weren't even interested in going on a date with me, or I feel like I do all of the work. And now he's like, oh, this is a safe conversation. It's like, oh, okay, no, I don't want you to feel that way.
Right. So it totally can come just from one spouse if done the right way. By putting that out to your spouse in an empathetic way, hearing where they are, getting that awareness, and then being able to share your truth. Is that a good summary?
Yeah. It is great summary. And so, that's the I think it's the Stephen R. Covey thing of this seek first to understand before being understood. Yes. And I feel like that concept is huge in EFT. So that's an example of that where, hey, let me kind of seek to understand where he's at before then I try to let him know where I'm at. So I really feel like being able to really listen and not just because we're so caught up and just ready to respond all the time. And that takes practice to not just want to just
Right.
respond,
Yeah,
right?
that's one of the things that we've been talking about the last few weeks on this podcast is, I mean, I did a whole one on empathetic listening,
Yeah,
right? Using your body language and just listening without listening to respond, trying to actually hear what your partner is saying, what's not being said, and feeling how they're truly feeling is where you're going to make that connection. And that can also be one-sided too. It doesn't take two people to do that, which I feel like if a partner is consistently doing that, then hopefully the other partner
yeah.
will respond in kind eventually.
Yeah, and I think it is fair to say because I know that I can make it sound like, see how easy this is, Amanda. You just do that, and then your
Yeah.
partner will say, "Oh my gosh, great," and then you live happily ever after, and that sort of thing. So I know that there's a couple of things in the world of EFT that there is kind of a thought where if people have a personality disorder, maybe if your husband's maybe struggles with some narcissistic tendencies, or if there's a really, really heavy addiction going
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
that's when maybe this isn't going to work the way that I'm laying it out with the rainbow and the unicorn and all that stuff. Because and that's when you have to really you still have to watch how, and that's why I really think that getting into couples counseling with someone who knows EFT is a really good idea. Just
Good idea.
because I'll often say to people that, and I'll be approached by women who will say, "Hey, I really think my husband is a narcissist, for example. I don't know if this is going to work." And, and I'll let them know that, the EFT framework is going to kind of, we're going to know. Cause I mean, if he is unwilling to then have that empathy or understanding, or if he or she immediately goes to the, but you don't understand, and they can't sit there with that empathy and say, okay, I can imagine that would be hard. I haven't thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Then that can be hard. Because and again, I love EFT, and I see a lot of couples. I do, and it works. It really does work. So for the therapist, it's pretty easy to see when it's not working, because I might have in a day 6 couples come in and have it working like a champ, and they've never communicated more in their life, and everything is great. And then here comes the 7th one, and it's just so hard. But they don't even know, because they don't know even what they're trying to work toward. They don't have that model, because so I can understand where some people might even be surprised that. And I've been vulnerable with my partner, and it doesn't work. And so that's where I do feel like, getting some help with that is probably pretty important. If it really doesn't feel natural, or it doesn't feel like it's doable in the way that you and I have kind of talked about it today.
Yeah. So I have a client who has a husband who just doesn't trust anybody. His previous wife was unfaithful. He has some trust issues with his parents. So, even though there's been nothing in their relationship that causes him to not trust her, he just doesn't trust anyone. So, like, how would you suggest in a situation like that? Like, they have a good marriage, but there's just that piece missing. They tend not to go deeper because he just isn't willing to fully open up.
Yeah, no, this is good. I'll first, this is a little bit of a joke, because when you're in grad school, through any example is like, well, I would send him to therapy, her to therapy. They would go to couples therapy. Their kids would go to therapy. Their pets would go to therapy. Everybody would go to therapy, and then it would all work out, right? Because I mean, my first thought is, boy, I would love to work with that guy, because it's like, and I love this concept of acceptance and commitment therapy, where what are the stories his brain's trying to fuse him on? It's that I can never trust anyone again, or his goal is to connect with his partner. If that's the goal, then it's like, it's normal for him to have those feelings and thoughts, because he's had that, betrayal or lack of trust in the past. But then is that a productive or workable thought toward getting closer with his partner? But all that aside, if I was doing couples therapy with them, the EFT framework still can work there, because it still requires him to be vulnerable. So if she's saying, I feel like you don't trust me, and I feel like I haven't given you reason not to, and I get him to sit there and, kind of understand that that's where she's coming from, that really would be hard, because here's this person that he is, he's married to and he cares about, and she's feeling like, this isn't me, right? That you're projecting this on me. Then we would hope we could get him to feel that. And then now we get to where's his train of thought come from? And it's this is that thing where I have a hard time trusting. And now if he's able to express that, and if that's met with no well, you should trust me. I haven't get, that now is met with empathy. Now there's a little
Yeah.
bit more awareness overall. And now, he will in theory feel like, okay, that felt a little bit better than me just withdrawing. And then her saying, I
Yeah.
haven't given you a reason not to trust. So it really is. I mean, EFT is all about this phrase of giving things a voice. So,
Mm.
and you can always go, if you are able to have these safe conversations, you're gonna learn more. There's gonna be a whole lot more awareness, and when you really start to feel that connection, or I say you secure the connection, then you do start to be able to work through some of these things where you just feel stuck.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So if you're met with, a spouse is coming to her husband and being vulnerable and opening up, and that bid is basically rejected, where do you go
Yeah.
from there?
That's hard. I mean, so I feel like, again, that would be the plug for getting somebody involved that knows how to frame that, because I feel like that would be hard, because there she is being vulnerable, and now that's just it's kind of backing up that feeling of abandonment, like this isn't working, and
Yeah.
that I must not be enough, or he doesn't want to connect with me. And so that's what I feel like most people are doing, is they're going in there when they get frustrated enough, and then they try to make that emotional bid. Sometimes though, if they're used to a pattern of it not working, it comes out in anger,
Yeah.
or it comes out in frustration, right? Or
Yeah.
and so then he's hearing the emotional bid come with of heat behind it, or baggage, and his brain's going to go into fight or flight mode. And so I feel like even when she does have good intentions, they've already developed this pattern.
Yep.
This, they call it in the EFT the protest polka. They've got the withdraw, pursue and withdraw, find the bad guy. Or so that's the hard
Yeah.
part, is that they've already got a pattern that doesn't really work very well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a cop out of an answer.
No, it's
Was it a
not.
little
It's
bit?
not. I mean, it definitely
Okay.
gives a direction of, where to go. Like if you're consistently putting out these bids and they're consistently being rejected, you need to
Yep.
find some additional help.
Yeah, because you're most likely, every time you go, it's going to take you a while before you get fed up enough to then put out that bid again. And it's usually going to come with, look, I've had enough. I really need you to pay more attention to me. I need to know you care about me. And when you're coming at it like that, and I don't blame anyone that coming at it that way, they're frustrated, right?
Yeah.
But now the guy is already going into fight or flight mode, and the adrenaline floods the brain, and the reasoning part takes a back seat, and all of a sudden he's ready for battle. So then, and then he's going to reflexively say stupid stuff that guys do, like, well, you don't do this, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
there we go again. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been great, Tony. I think we have a much better understanding of this emotionally focused communication and how it can better help our marriages. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
I had such a fun time. No, boy, time flies though when we're having fun, huh?
It does. It does. All right. I'm going to stop us now.
Okay, perfect.